Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature Underground. Despite appearances, my name is Hunter Lanier, and I come to you today with yet another new review of an upcoming movie. This time it is Nouvelle Vague, one of two Richard Linklater movies we are getting this year, the other being Blue Moon. Much like Ed Wood or The Disaster Artist, the film follows the front-to-back making of a real-life movie. Now, in this case, it is not one of the worst movies ever made, despite my perhaps ill-chosen examples, but rather one of the most influential movies ever made, and that is, of course, Breathless, directed by Jean-Luc Godard. Oh, and I always forget to say when these movies I'm reviewing actually come out. Nouvelle Vague is already out in very limited release, I believe, but it is coming out on Netflix everywhere, presumably on November 14th. Although his name is now synonymous with cinema, or just CIN synonymous, Nouvelle Vague's Godard is little more than a film critic who is tired on waiting for others to make the movies that he wants to see. What's great about the film's version of Godard is that he is either the world's most insufferable pseudo-intellectual, or he's onto something. Now, we as the audience know what all of Godard's efforts lead to, but for all of the other characters in the movie, Godard is he's like the tennis ball from Match Point bouncing up and down on the net between loser and genius. The reason I really love this version of Godard is because he's a great proxy for every aspiring artist, or just anyone with a lofty goal. To the rest of the world, you look insane trying to pursue unlikely objectives in unlikely ways, but you have to have the unearned confidence of this young Godard to kind of create your own tailwind. You have to believe that you are capable of writing a great novel if you are going to sit down and write a great novel, because otherwise, what's even the point of trying? I think it was Chris Rock or somebody like that had a joke, talking about how narcissistic presidential candidates have to be to wake up in the morning and think to themselves sincerely, you know what? I should be the leader of the free world. And it's true. You have to be kind of crazy to put yourself in a position where you can do something exceptional. The Pantheon selects for crazy. And believe it or not, that really gets at the heart of what Nouvelle Vague is about. It is about the joy of being an artist. It's about the runner's high of creation. When you have a clear vision and all of the Tetris blocks are falling into place. It's about the spiritual fulfillment that you can only get from doing something that you love. The kind of feeling that you can't get from a promotion in a bigger office. I'm not an expert in the actual history of the making of Breathless, but the film presents it as having virtually no struggles. It's just people having fun making something together. And it's all done in the very style that the characters in the film are making, the French New Wave. So you have Godard and Jean Seberg and Jean-Paul Belmondo joking and playing and flirting like their characters in Jules and Jim. And if you're looking for a modern director to capture the French New Wave's mellow improvisational style and reflective dialogue, there is perhaps no one better for the job than the guy who made Slacker. One thing I wanted to mention before I forget is that Godard in the movie is literally always wearing dark sunglasses. I know Godard had this reputation, but if it was as severe as it is portrayed in this movie, I would be shocked. We never see the whites of Guillaume Marbeck's eyes. This is the actor who plays Godard, who is very good in a very, discreet kind of way. Not only does Godard wear his dark sunglasses indoors in the film, but he wears the sunglasses to go see movies at the movie theater. Maybe Godard saw the future and was preparing himself for the dimness of 3D projectors. But whatever the case, one cool thing it does in the movie is that it creates this reoccurring visual motif where you see some of the most famous final frames in movie history reflected in his sunglasses as he watches them. Now, as much lighthearted fun as I think the movie is, about an hour in, the fortune cookie dialogue of Godard started to get a little bit grating. His character is very much in line with being in that first generation of filmmakers who were film snobs. And because the movie isn't setting out to create three-dimensional versions of these people, he comes across a little bit like a pull-string doll. And I did just accidentally touch on something that I want to speak more about, which is that realism is not the objective of this movie. Jean-Luc Godard and the making of Breathless, they are portrayed as what they mean now to the filmmakers they inspired, not as at what they actually were. That's not a knock against the movie. I'm just trying to clarify what it is and what it's trying to be. This is a floaty, good-natured Richard Linklater movie, not an in-depth biography. I do also think there's something to be said about Godard's pull-string nature being a good representation for the hydrology of influence that is unique to these characters and this film in particular. Hydrology. So, water goes down your drain. It ends up in a sewer, which takes it to a filtration plant, which puts it back in the river, which takes it to the ocean. And then it evaporates, and then it rains back into a river, which takes it back to a filtration plant, which pumps it back into your sink, and the cycle repeats. Influence works much in the same way, and Godard's generation was the first generation that was hugely inspired by the filmmakers that came before it, like Alfred Hitchcock and Howard Hawks. Howard Hawks couldn't be that hugely inspired by the filmmakers that came before him because there really weren't very many. 60 years after Breathless, we now have an American filmmaker hugely influenced by a French filmmaker making a film about that French filmmaker who was hugely influenced by American filmmakers. If you think of it that way, Nouvelle Vague becomes all the more special because it becomes almost like a closed loop moment. The water coming out of the faucet is now the water that went down the drain. I do feel somewhat compelled to be totally honest and transparent with my lovely audience and say that I am actually not a big fan of the French New Wave or Godard in particular. Of the movies of his that I've seen, and Godard has made a lot of movies, many I've seen, many I've not seen. I think the movie of his that I like the most is Masculine Feminine. I think I've always just found the French New Wave broadly to be too myopic and melodramatic for my tastes. I enjoy the movies more in a visual sense than I do as stories. But I can certainly see how the movement's run and gun freedom would have been hugely inspirational to young people in the 60s who were conditioned to the deliberative glamour of Hollywood, which at that point in the early 60s had really started to become parody. All that said, I do want to say that Godard's movie Weekend has one of my all-time favorite gags in any movie. It's the scene where the camera is slowly panning over the never-ending traffic jam, and then you finally see what's at the end. It is a truly funny and cruel joke. Speaking of that joke in particular, it just made me think, and maybe I've already kind of said this in a different way, but as much as Linklater is obviously, with Slacker, a ripple of the French New Wave, he doesn't have any of Godard's acid. As I've said before, Linklater turns Godard and Breathless into a rose-colored memory of artistic freedom, and a very welcoming and good-natured one at that. My guess is that Godard would have hated this movie, for whatever that's worth, or at least he would have said that he hated it. Well, those are all my thoughts on Nouvelle Vague. Now is the time for you to let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. Not quite sure which review I'll have coming up next. I am seeing Well, I was supposed to see Hamnet on Thursday, but my car doesn't work, so I'm stuck at home. But next week, I am seeing Marty Supreme. The review embargo for that one doesn't lift until, I think, the first week of December. I just also found out that Disney is sending me on November 17th the newly restored episodes of the Beatles anthology, the documentary. Very excited about that. I have the DVD box set back behind me somewhere, so I think I may do a video for that as well. Until then, I leave you with the popcorn kernel of truth that every day underground is a good day.